Alrighty. So here we have finally our second lecture, chapter 2. This is our first bit of grammar. In the last chapter, we talked about pronunciation and how the characters work together. And today we'll be talking about regular O verbs. They're called O because when you look in a dictionary, you'll find that all of these verbs in the dictionary end with the letter O. And so these O verbs are from their lexical form. Agapao is a good example of this. Agapao is the first person singular present active indicative form of I love. Don't worry about all those words. We'll explain them all in this chapter, but agapao is a good example of an omega verb. So I put that there. Now, sorry about that. An omega verb doesn't always end in omega. An omega verb or a regular verb sometimes will have different endings depending on who is doing the action or who the action is being done to. The subject of the action would change the ending. So let's look at some examples. Didasko ta tekna, I teach the children. Pistuo ta tekna, I believe the children. Lepe ta tekna, he sees the children. Lege ta tekna, I tell the children. Akuete ta tekna, you all hear the children. And luete ta tekna, you destroy the children. We see here that in different wordings, these are all regular verbs, but each of them has different endings. When the omega is present, we see that the subject is I. When epsilon iota is present, we see that the subject is he or she. That's supposed to be he, she. I don't know what happened there. Akuete is you all, like you, the general you all. And we see that the ending changes depending on the subject. Now, let's just give you this at the beginning of the lecture, and then I'll give it to you at the end when you come to understand it a little more. We'll be talking about present, active, indicative. We'll explain each of those in turn in order that we can understand what exactly this verb is. You have 6 endings to memorize. These endings are going to be the main source of grammar, and every other word every other verb is based off of these endings in some form. You'll see these again and again. So it is a great idea to memorize this paradigm. First person singular, I, has an omega ending, luo. First person plural, we, has an omen ending, omicron, mu, epsilon, nu, luomen. Second person singular is ace, you loosen. Second person plural, you all, is luete, with the epsilon, tau, epsilon. Third person singular is a, epsilon iota, he, she, it loosens. And lu usin is they loosen. Now, it might just be usi. You might see usin with that nu at the end. That changes depending on the following word. It doesn't necessarily have to be there, but we'll introduce that more as it comes up in the sentences. What does exactly present active indicative mean? These three have three different parts to it. Present is the tense, active is the voice, and indicative is the mood. So we'll be talking about three different categories of English grammar in order to better understand Greek grammar. Those are tense, voice, and mood. So what is tense? The tense answers the when and the how. So present tense is present. I am doing this, or I do this. As for the question of how, there is two different forms of this. There is simple and progressive. Simple present is I want a break, or I swim. And there is, in simple, there is no reference to ongoing action. In other words, we can't tell if this action takes place over a period of time or not. All we know is that it is happening currently. As for progressive, we see that this action is happening in time. So I am wanting a break. I am swimming. It adds this ing to the end of it in English. And so we don't really make too big of a deal with it, but it's important to the Greek reader because it shows this progressive action. Let's continue on, and we'll show you more examples as it comes up. As for the question of when in the present tense, this is where we get our different forms of tense. We have present tense, I write, or I am writing words. This can either be simple or progressive. Imperfect is I was writing in the past, and it was done over a progress or a process. He was writing. He didn't write the words. Future tense is I will write the word. I will write words. This is in the future. Aorist, which technically means no tense, is most commonly used to refer to the past tense. So instead of I was writing words, aorist tense is I wrote words in the past. There's no reference to that action being over a progress. It's not used as if it was a story. Perfect tense is I have written the words. Pluperfect is I had written the words, and future perfect is I will have written to the words. I don't want to spend too much time on those, but I hope this lets you see that when it comes to tense, tense answers the question of when the verb takes place, or maybe how the verb is taking place. Is it in a moment or is it over time? The second thing we'll be talking about is voice, how the subject interacts with the verb. And real quick note, we are only talking about the present tense here. We're not going to unload all of these all at once. We're just talking about the present tense. Voice. The voice is simply how the subject interacts with the verb. Is the subject doing the verb? Is the subject doing it to himself? or is the subject having the verb done to him? Active voice is I know you. That is, the subject is doing the verb to something else. Passive voice is where the subject is having the verb done to it. I am known by you. You is the one doing the knowing, but I is the subject. Middle voice is I know for myself. It is done, the subject does the verb to the subject. So I do it for I. We'll talk more about those in a later date, but now you only need to think about the subject doing the verb to something else. Now, we finally get to the third part of verbs that we will be discussing when talking about present, active, indicative. We talked about present tense. It's happening presently. We talked about active tense, active voice, where the subject is the one doing the verb. And now we're going to talk about the most tricky, is mood. Mood describes what is being expressed by the verb. In other words, how is the verb being used? Is it used to tell things? And an indicative, I love God, the verb tells what the subject is doing. An infinitive is used like a verbal noun. I want to love God. So it's used as I want. What do you want? To love. So to love is used kind of like a direct object. It acts like a verbal noun. And an imperative is used to indicate a command. You love God. That it's being used as a command. It's not telling you what has been done. Subjunctive implies this idea of it could happen. If I should love God, he also loves me. It's this idea of plausibility. An optative is more of a wish. May you love God more. It acts more like a wish rather than as a command or anything like that. Today, we're just talking about indicative, loving God. And there is more moods, but there's also the participles, but we won't talk about these in this lecture. So we also will be going over infinitives. Real quick, I want to point out, we have talked about our endings for indicative. Luo, lues, lue, luomen, luete, lucy. But here we have also thrown in, because it's not really that hard, is infinitives. These will be used as our nouns in this first chapter, even though we don't have any nouns. A present active infinitive verb ends with epsilon, iota, nu, aim. Lu, aim. That is to loosen. It's distinguished by the suffix aim. And some examples would be aku aim, to hear, graphein, to write, and thelein, to will, to want, to wish. And these are examples of where the ain ending makes the verb into an infinitive. So here we have an updated chart. We have luo, lues, lue, luomen, luete, lucy, and then now luain, to loosen. Those are all of the endings and all of the forms of verbs that we'll be talking about in this chapter. If you want to memorize something, this is the chart that you will want to memorize. And now I want to go over and recap some things that I may have missed out, I may have not talked about, and that is how to break down a word, a verb specifically, whether it be in the homework or just into its different parts. So I have included this for you for the word legete. Legete is you say, you all say. And there's different parts of the verb. There's 5 different parts to a verb. That is the tense, the voice, the mood, the person, and the number. We didn't talk about person or number, but we see that in the chart. Person would be first, second, third person, and number would be singular or plural. So the tense. In this case, we have a present tense verb. Then you would write the voice. In this case, we have an active voice verb. Then you write the mood, how the verb is being used. And here we have indicative because of that ete ending. And then we have the person. First person is third person. In this example, ete is a second person verb. And then the number. Is it singular or plural? In this example, it is plural. You plural. And so we have at the bottom here, legete, present active indicative, second person plural. That is a parsing of legete. There's 2 other things, though, you might want to write down when parsing a verb for the homework. One is the lexical form. We talked about this a little, but let me really hammer down what a lexical form is. A lexical form is the form you will find in a dictionary or in the book, in the vocabulary section. Regular verbs have the simple omega ending, lego. And this is usually in the present indicative case. The present indicative tense and voice, I should say. Present indicative tense and mood, sorry. And then you have the meaning. For legete, the meaning is you say or you are saying, because present can either be simple or it can be progressive. We will be discussing more about how that works, especially during the Zoom call, but I hope you gain some insight into what that is. So a full parsing would be legete. It's a present active indicative, second person plural verb from the lexical form lego, which is the form you would find in the dictionary. And it means you say, or you are saying. And that's what you would write in the section that says parsing on the homework. So now let's get into some practice. If we remember these endings, we can take the words from the vocabulary in chapter 2. So if you happen to have your book, please open it up. You can pause the video and grab your book, but go to the vocabulary section for chapter 2 and look at it as we are going through these practice examples. First example is luomen. Please pause the video and say what this is saying. What is the subject and what is the verb? Please pause. Okay, and so luomen is translated we destroy or we loosen, because omen is a first person plural ending. Akuete. Please pause. Akuete is you, plural here, or you, plural, are listening, or you, plural, are hearing. you see it can be simple or progressive, depending on context. See, you are listening and you hear can be either or for this word. Leges. Please pause. Leges is you say or you are speaking. You see it can be simple or progressive. And this is a present active indicative. So agape. Agape is he, she, it loves. We talked about that word earlier. I don't think it's in the vocabulary for chapter 2, but it should be at the beginning of this lecture. Agape is going to be he, she, it loves, or he, she, it is loving. All right. 1, 2, 3. Thelo legen translates to I want to speak, or I want to say, or I desire to say. Thelo is first person singular ending of the verb for I wish. Legen is the present active infinitive ending for lego. So it translates to say. So we have I wish to say. You will often find the verb thelo followed by an infinitive, because I wish not followed by an infinitive doesn't make much sense. You wish for what? So it needs a verb usually to follow it. All right. Lucy. Lucy is translated they loosen, or they destroy, or they are loosening, or they are destroying. And finally, we have, oh, I believe that is it. I hope that was good practice. There is more practice in the homework. I would like to pull that up for you right now. This would be in, no, is this it? Here it is. So in the back of chapter 2, there is practice and review, sentences 1 through 5. We practice how to write out each letter. So if we copy each sentence by hand neatly, then we can translate the sentence after we copy each sentence by hand. And after we've copied each sentence and translated, I will be asking for the parsing of all the verbs. If we remember, the parsing, there we go, is described here, which I will be sending you this. Every single step of the parsing that to include if you want to get a full parsing, but only 1 through 5 are really necessary. I recommend writing 1 through 7 until you get used to the lexical form and its inflected meaning, until you really have those down, if you really know those verbs. If you're not familiar with the verb, I would recommend writing it. And write that parsing that you see here at the bottom after each verb. And do this for sentences 1 through 5 for the first homework. And for the second, I will be offering corrections to the homework, which you can look at and then grade yourself. And then more sentences for the next homework. Practice and review 6 through 10, where all of these will be asked for parsing the verbs and a translation, but you do not have to copy the sentences. You can if you want to. I do not say you have to, though, for the second part of the homework. Then you have LXX1, which is Septuagint, sentence 1. NT3, which is New Testament, number 3, translate that one. English to Greek, number 1, translate it. And you do not have to parse any of the verbs in these. You only have to translate it. And that is how the homework will be for each single week. For instance, next week, you only have to parse the nouns and the verbs. No other words, just the nouns and the verbs. And this will change depending on what we were learning throughout the week. For instance, if we go down to week 8, it's verbs and pronouns. 12 is verbs. And then there will be a lot of nouns and verbs in 17. And we see a pattern continuing. And that is what I'm asking on the homework. If you do not have this, please let me know. I will email this to you right away. I hope this has been comprehensive for chapter 2. You have the book, you have me. If you need ways to contact me, you have my email as well as my number. Please, if you do not like emailing me, please send me a text or a call. Although if you call me, I would like to know who it is before I answer it. Otherwise, I might think you're spam. It's not intentional. It just happens a lot. And that is all the grammar I have for you this week. It might seem like a lot, but eventually we will get it under our belts, like constant practice. Constant practice is the key to getting this down. You're all going to do great, and I hope you get this as soon as possible so that you can attempt the grammar. All right. God bless. Have a great day.